All right, I will say good morning. Incredible daf ahead of us today. You begin by thanking all of our sponsors. To thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Teves, the Daf Yomi Shiur memory of Mr. Milton Marder, Mordechai Dovid, and Rephael HaKohen. To thank Shirley Elbaum Family for dedicating the Shir Midrashos this month, commemoration of the yahrzeit of Gerald Elbaum, Yaakov Kopel, R Avraham Menachem. To thank our week of learning sponsors, Paul and Kathy Pollack, in creation of the yahrzeit of Paul's sister, Leah Bas Shmuel. And Paul and Kathy Pollack in the zchus of refuah shalaimah for Rav Dovid HaCohen ben Leah, who will be undergoing open heart surgery this week. We thank our Daf Yomi, our week of learning sponsors, Saeed Sima Haken, Leah nishmas, Sima's mother, Miriam Bas Elazar, and Sima's father, Yechezkel ben Aga Saleh. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah, and the families a neshama, and those who require refuah should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. To start. Thank you. My muscle memory is off. Thank you. All right, Chavra on Zoom, you still me all right? Excellent. Good, perfect. All right, I will say good morning. Let us begin. So first I want to thank Rabbi Richter for giving shiur over the last 2 days while I was out. Thank you so much. We'll say, okay, so let's begin. A lot to do today. Here's Hashem. Good. So we're starting on, today's daf is Ayin Gimel 73, and we are starting 3 lines down from the top. Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph, some really great cases. Cheresh Mahu Sheyafer Leishto. They both say, what is the halacha? What is the halacha ultimately again of a cheresh? Is a cheresh able to go ahead and annul the vows of his wife? Now, I both say, if you take a quick look at the Ran, so the Ran says over here, it's in the intermediate wide lines, about 1, 2, 3, 4 lines in. So both say, so the first thing the Ran says is, what type of cheresh are we talking about over here? So here's what's interesting. In general, when we find cheresh in Gemara, what does cheresh mean? Deaf mute. Shabbos, I said, obviously can't be what the Gemara is referring to over here, because a deaf mute lacks das. So without das, obviously you can't annul any Nedarim. Therefore, the Ran says the cheresh we're dealing with over here is cheresh hamedaber ve'eno shomea. This is a cheresh who is able to hear, able to speak, but unable to hear. So the shaila is, and Nabosai, remember, speech in and of itself is the greatest expression of das. And a person is able to dialogue, that indicates that they have mental capacity. So therefore, a husband has mental capacity. What's the problem over here? A technical issue. He's unable to hear his wife's Nedarim. So now, what's the shaila? So again, back to the Gemara. So does a cheresh have the ability to annul his wife's vows? So let's analyze this. So we'll say, now remember, if we go back to the previous sugya, so remember the Gemara asked the shaila, does the husband have the ability to go ahead and annul his wife's vows without hearing them? And I will say, so the truth is, let me just tell you the halacha l'maisa from that sugya before we go right there. So the Rambam in Hilchos Nedarim, Perek Yud Aleph, Halacha Chaf Aleph. Perek Yud Aleph, Halacha Chaf. I just want to tell you, it's incredible to think about the days that we live in. A while ago, Maishi introduced me to the Safaria app, right? So I will say, so I was out of town last 2 days, so I was preparing the daf somewhere else, and I didn't have Sfarim with me. So I will say, it's absolutely incredible, just to show the days that we live in. So I wanted to look up the Rambam, so I pull up Sfaria, you have Ram there, but it gets better. So I took a screenshot of Sfaria, which my 12-year-old told me how to do. I took a screenshot. Right, I sent it to my assistant in the office, and she printed it for me. So I come back this morning. It's an incredible thing. I have all my Rambams printed out to me, right from all of my screen. I would say, it's an incredible thing, but it's an awesome mechayiv, because what's going to happen? After 120, we're going to come up to Shamayim, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to say, no, why didn't you become an outstanding Talmud Chacham? And I'm going to say, what do you mean? I had a job. What do you mean? I'm a guy. What do you mean? I was standing Talmud Chacham. I learned I did. I'm going to say, one second. You lived in a time where you had all of these tools for learning. Anything and everything you want is literally, again, at your fingertips. Anything and everything you want is right there. So we sometimes look at these tools for learning as like a convenience, which it is, but it's more than just a convenience. It's a mechayiv. It obligates us to really up our game. And it obligates us to really push ourselves to take on more and to learn more, because we're living in a time where literally it's just so easy. Anyway, so the Rambam writes in Hilchos Nedarim Perek Yud Aleph Halacha Chaf Aleph. Listen to this. V'chein abal. So the Rose said this is actually the conclusion of the previous sugya. V'chein abal shelo tikanis l'rshuso omer lo kol nedarim shenadart misheirastich ad shelo tikansi v'sok beisi hareim mufarin shabal nefer nidrei ishta afa pi shelo shama osam. So we'll say, so the Rambam paskins that a husband has the ability to go ahead and annul his wife's vows, even if he did not hear them. Now remember, this is talking about a very specific case of during Erusin. During Erusin, a husband wants to annul all of his wife's vows that she took between Erusin and Yisrael. In other words, when they get married, he doesn't want her coming into marriage with any vows on her. So he can go ahead and annul any of her Nedarim that she took during the period of Erusin, even if he did not hear them. So we'll say, so that's halacha number one. Now, again, so that is important because the Gemara is going to be operating on this, based on this assumption. A husband has the ability to annul his wife's vows during Erusin, even if he did not hear them. So back to the Gemara. So here we go. So imtim solamar bal mefer below shmiya. So we'll say, like we said before, a husband has the ability to annul his wife's vows during Erusin, even if he did not hear them. But we'll say, but why is that? Mishum debar mishmahu. I will say, but that's because he's able to hear them. In other words, the Gemara is suggesting, maybe the reason a husband has the ability to annul his wife's vows, even if he didn't hear them, was why? Because he has the ability to hear them. He has the ability to hear them. So the Gemara says, so we'll say, what does that mean he has the ability to them? Listen to this. Hainu Rabbi Zera, Dam Rabbi Zera, Kalaroi lebila, ein bila ma'akevesbo. So I will say, this is actually a fascinating halacha. Because what does Rabbi Zera say? Anything that can be mixed, so mixing is not ma'akev. I will say, what is this referring to? It's referring to a karba mincha. So remember again, a karba mincha is fine flour together with oil. You put that all in a big bowl. So the Gemara says like this, well, say, so the halacha normally is that the karba mincha itself has to be mixed. Now, after you mix it, a mincha is prepared in different ways. But the Gemara says like this, is mixing ma'akev. Let's say you have a karban mincha, you didn't mix it up. Is that ma'akev? Does that somehow, is that a crucial part in the kashrus of the karban? So the Gemara gives a very interesting klal. Rabbi Zera says, anything that can be mixed, mixing is not ma'akev. But if something cannot be mixed, then mixing is ma'akev. And they both say, what does it mean can be mixed, can't be mixed? The Gemara understands this thing like this. I will say, if you go ahead and you fill the mincha bowl to the point that it's certain, I will say, you ever try to mix something? If you fill the bowl too high, what happens when you mix it? Everything pours over the side. So if the mincha bowl is filled up too high, that if you were to mix it, ultimately, again, it would pour over the side, then that mincha is invalid. That mincha is invalid. Why? Because it's not mixable. However, if the mincha is mixable, but you failed to mix it, halacha l'maaseh, karban mincha is still going to be kosher. So I will say, this creates an interesting paradigm. What's the paradigm? The paradigm says like this: anything or any situation where a process can occur, even if it doesn't occur, the failure to perform the process does not undermine the effectiveness of the particular thing. That's not good English. In other words, let me say it differently. Any situation where a process could occur, but the process did not occur, the process is still kosher, as long as the process could have technically occurred. But any situation where halacha l'maaseh the process could not have occurred, failure to perform the process ultimately undermines its kashrus. So again, Rabbi Zera says that the paradigm of that is karban mincha. Any mincha which is mixable, even if you don't mix it, the mincha is kosher. But if the mincha was not mixable, then halacha l'maaseh failure to mix it renders it invalid. That becomes a paradigm. So also you could apply that over here also. What do we say? See, we just said before that if the husband doesn't hear his wife's Nedarim, he could still go ahead and annul them. Why? Because he has the ability to hear them. So maybe as long as husband has the ability to hear the Nedarim, ultimately, again, that is going to be enough. Even if he doesn't hear it, it's still going to be, he can still annul it. But if he can't hear it, i.e. he's deaf, maybe halacha l'maisa, that undermines his ability to go ahead and annul the Nedarim. Oh, Dilma, so there's one possibility. So the Gemara will say, so remember, let's just keep the stage of the process over here. What's your question? Can a cheirish husband, can a deaf husband annul his wife's vows? So we'll say, so far again, so if we accept the premise that a husband has the ability to annul his wife's vows even if he doesn't hear them, maybe that's because the husband possesses the ability to hear them. And as long as you have the ability to hear, even if you don't hear, that's not going to undermine the process. However, a cheirish doesn't have the ability to hear, and therefore his inability to hear perhaps fundamentally undermines his ability to annul his wife's vows. Oh, Dilma, or I will say perhaps the pasuk of Dilma, B'shama isha lo ma'akev. And I will say, now remember again, the whole chab of hearing this, I will say, is because the pasuk itself says, B'shama isha, her husband will hear. Maybe that's just an expression. And lemaisa, again, it's not meant ultimately, again, to be specific. So we'll say, so what's the halacha? Amarava, Tashma, V'shama Isha. Rava says, the pasuk says, V'shama Isha. What do we learn from there? Prat le'ishes cheirish shmamina. They will say that comes to ultimately, again, exclude the wife of a cheirish, and indeed, learn from here that halacha l'maisa cheirish doesn't have the ability to annul his wife's vows. So I will say, so again, this is the halacha of the Rambam in Perek Yud Beis. Halacha Yud Gimel. Halacha Yud Gimel says as follows. So we'll say Perek Yud Beis, Halacha Yud Gimel. Here we go. The Gemara says, 1 second. Yeah, here it is. Ha'av ha'abal she'ein shomim ein meferi. So we'll listen to this. A father or a husband who do not go ahead, who cannot hear, don't have the ability to annul the vow. So we'll say, so now listen to this. Afapi shabam mefer nedam shloshma. So we'll say, listen to the Rambam here. The Rambam says, halacha l'maisa. If the father or the husband don't, she'in shomin. Now she'in shomin means they're deaf. If they're deaf, they don't have the ability to annul the vow. So we'll say, so 1 second. Afapi shabam mefer nedam shloshma. But what did we just say? We just saw in the previous halacha that what? That even if a husband doesn't hear the vows of his wife during Erusin, he has the ability to annul them. So how do you reconcile those two halachos? Right? Rambam here just said, if the father or the husband don't have the ability to hear, they can't annul a vow. But yet, even though we said before that a husband can annul vows that he did not hear, how do you reconcile that? Very simple. Haroi lishmoa ein hashmua ma'akev esbo. They will say that Rambam essentially accepts the halachic principle of Rabbi Zera, that as long as the husband has the ability to hear, in other words, we'll say, essentially what's happening over here is as follows. When the Torah says, V'shama Isha, her husband hears, what is the Torah telling us? That in order for Hataras Nedarim or Hafaras Nedarim to occur, what has to happen? The husband has to have the ability to hear. That is the Gzeras HaKasar. I will say that's the pasuk. Husband has to have the ability to hear. And if husband doesn't possess the ability to hear, then halacha l'maisa, he does not have the ability to annul his wife's nedarim. That's the halacha. Now both say there's a follow-up halacha. What's the follow-up halacha? That during Erusin, a husband has the ability to say to his wife, any nedarim you took during Erusin, I am annulling. Even if he did not hear them. But he didn't hear them. So we'll say, this is where we're getting to Rabbi Zera. What does Rabbi Zera say? See, as long as he had the ability to hear, that counts it almost as if that what? That he heard it. Because kal roy lebila ein bila ma'akeves. Again, the paradigm from kal mincha, as long as you could be mixed, then Allah L'maisa, failure to mix does not negate the effectiveness of the cover. So we'll say, two important pieces of Allah L'maisa. So number one, a husband does have the ability to go ahead and annul his wife's vows during Erusin, even if he did not hear them. Halacha number two, a husband must hear his wife's vows in order to annul them. I know it sounds a little contradictory, but you understand the reconciliation. And halacha number 3, a cheresh, therefore, a husband who is deaf does not have the ability to go ahead and annul his wife's vows. Incredible. Ibailu. They both say, I'm giving on Aleph 73a. We're now picking up 2, 4, 6 lines up from the bottom. Ibailu. Bal Maushiyah for the Shtei Nasha Basachos. We'll say, interesting case here. Does the husband have the ability to annul he has 2 wives, right? Let's say again, Reuven is married to Rachel and Leah. Rachel and Leah both made vows. Could Reuven annul their vows simultaneously? They both say, take a look at the Ran for just a moment. This is the Ran on the wide lines, 2, 4, 6 lines in. Ibailu Bal Maushiyah for the Shtei Nasha Basachos. Shinadru Shtehen Yomar Lahen Mufar Lachon. So we'll say they both made Nedarim. They both made Nedarim. I will say it's possible. Maybe they made the same Nedarim. Didn't make the same. It doesn't really matter, right? They both made a Neder at the same time. Does he have the ability, or even not at the same time? They both made a Neder on the same day. Does he have the ability to go ahead and annul their Nedarim simultaneously? Okay, so we'll say let's analyze. So the Gemara says, do we say Osa Dafka or Lav Dafka? So we'll say the lashon of the pasuk is he annuls the neder for her, osa, singular. So what's the shaila? Do we say that osa, singular, is specific? Namely, the Torah is telling us that a husband only has the ability to annul the neder for his wife one at a time, or not? Or maybe just osa is an expression, or it's not dafka, it's not specific, and in your husband could go ahead and annul the nedarim of 2 wives at the same time. So let's analyze. Amar Ravina. Ravina says as follows: Tashma. Let's analyze. So we'll say if you take first, I'll just take a quick look at the Ran, right in the same place. It's 2, 4, 6, 7 lines in the wide lines. Osad dafka biyom shemoa isha yania osa. We'll say that's the phrase of the pasuk. On the day that her husband hears her, yania osa, he'll restrain her. V'had debaye bebal. Huadin ba'av degabe avna miksevasa. Fran just points out, I will say, by the way, that the same question by the by the husband, the same question by the father. Let's say a father has 2 daughters, right? And both daughters make nedarim. Does the father have the ability to annul the nedarim of his 2 daughters simultaneously? Okay, so we'll say, so what's the shaila? Shaila in the pasuk. When it says, Daniya osa, he restrains her, he annuls her neder, osa singular, is it meant singular dafka, only one annulment at a time? Or no, you could even do group annulments. So the Gemara says as follows. Let's analyze. Amar Ravina says, Tashma, in mashkin shtei sotos ka'achos mipnei shaliba gas bechaverta. So we'll say it's an interesting case. So we'll say we know what's a sota. A sota ultimately is a woman who is suspected of adultery. And not just suspected, it's very important, right? Reuven's married to Rachel, and Reuven perceives that Rachel is behaving inappropriately with another man. So we'll call him Shimon. So what happens? Reuven says to Rachel, you are not allowed to be alone with Shimon. Okay? He gives her this warning in front of witnesses. She then violates the warning and is alone with Shimon for enough time, we call the Gemara says, for enough time for something illicit to have occurred. Now both say, do we know did something occur? Did something occur? We don't know. But there's certainly enough circumstantial evidence for us to be concerned. Both say that triggers the process of sota, by which she has to go up to the Beis HaMikdash. Remember again, they write the parasha of sota on a piece of parchment. The parchment is dissolved in water. She drinks the water, and it's that water that checks whether or not she chas v'shalom committed adultery. So the Gemara says as follows: In mashkin shei sotos ka'achos. I will say we do not go ahead. Let's say again, you have 2 women who show up for the sota process simultaneously. 2 women, not co-wives, just two women, 2 independent women. They just both happen to show up to the Beis HaMikdash for the sota process simultaneously. The Gemara says we do not administer waters to them simultaneously. There's no group sota, no group sota waters, right? In other words, we only do them one at a time. We'll say now, why is that? Very interesting. Mipnei shalibo gas bechaverta. Now we'll say, what is that? We look at the Ran again. Mipnei shalibo gas bechaverta. This is incredible. Shepamim shechaverta tahora v'hitmea. But so what are we concerned about? Imagine for a moment there are 2 women who show up for the sota process. Woman A and woman B. It's not right to use Rachel and Leah, right, for this, right? So woman A and woman B, they show up ultimately for the sota process. So both say, so what happens? A shows up, and A did not do anything. So she knows that she's tahora. So both say, so remember again, if she's tahora, what is she willing to do? What is she willing to do? Drink the water. Because let's remember again, the Gemara Masechah Sota brings down, when we get to this soon, Gemara Masechah Sota brings down that if a woman is not guilty of adultery, the waters actually act as an incredible source of bracha for her. So she's willing to drink. Now remember, I will say, part of the whole Sota process is, we try to convince the woman, admit your guilt. Admit your guilt. Don't go through this process. Don't have the name of Hashem erased in the water. Right? If you're guilty, admit your guilt. So woman A, she's not guilty. And if she's not guilty, there's nothing to admit. So she stands her ground, and what do we consider that? The Ran says, on the other hand, V'hi Timeya, Ukeshetira Chaverta Omeres Tahora Ani Tagis Daita. So I'll say, now listen to this. So what's the concern? The concern is A is innocent. B is guilty. B is going to be watching A. Right? And A is going to say, I'm innocent. I'm good to go. Right? Bring it on. Right? Erase those waters. Erase that parchment. Right? I'm ready to drink it. So what's going to happen? B is going to be emboldened, right, to lie because A is proclaiming her innocence. Meanwhile, it's in best interest of B not to drink those waters, because if she did commit adultery, those waters will kill her, right? So instead, so much better off for B just to admit her mistake. Again, there are precautions for that, but at least her life is spared. So because of that, we do not go ahead and administer waters to two women simultaneously, out of concern that one will be innocent, and the second one, who is guilty, will feel emboldened to proclaim her innocence even though she's not really innocent. Where perhaps if she's just doing it privately, one-on-one with the Kohen, maybe she'll feel a little bit more confident just to go ahead and admit her transgression. So Imashkin Shesodos Ka'achos Yishli B'gas B'chavet. Rabbi Dovid says, no, Lo Min Hashem Zuzeh. That's not the reason. Elu Mishum Shneimar V'hishka Osa Levada. So we'll say no, because by Sota, what does it say? V'hishka Osa. We'll say, what's Osa? Osa means her. Her what? Her alone. Her alone. So everyone will say, what does it mean, her alone? That halacha l'maisa, again, what it means is we only do one sota at a time. It's exeris hakasu. So we'll say, what do you see from here? That whenever you have the word osa, what does osa mean? Osa means one person at a time. One person at a time. So we'll say, let's plug this back to what we said. What was our shaila? Our shaila was, could a husband go ahead and annul Nedarim for two of his wives simultaneously? So I will say, it sounds like based on what the Gemara is saying over here, that what should be the answer to that? No. Why not? Because our sugya, our pasuk also says, V'hina osa. He restrains her, he annuls her neder osa. Sounds like, again, halacha l'maisa, one at a time. So we'll say, so the Rambam Paskins over here, this is again in Parak Yud Gimel. Halacha Yud Dalid. I will say, here it is. The Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says, V'habal. So how does the Rambam Paskin? V'habal meifer nidre shtei noshav ka'achas. So we'll say the Rambam Paskin is actually different than what it sounds like is the conclusion of the Gemara. We're actually the Ran already Paskins like the Rambam already Paskins like the Ran. Namely, a husband does have the ability to annul the Nedarim for two wives simultaneously. In other words, we will say that we do not accept this drasha of Osa. Osa does not mean specifically one at a time, but Allah Kalamaisa, we paskin that a husband does have the ability to annul Nedarim for two wives simultaneously. Beautiful. I will say, let's go back to Amud Beis and Gimel Beis Mishnah. Really interesting case. Bogeres Shesha Seyid Beis Chodesh Va'amon Alamio. So I'll say this is a throwback to our Ksuvas days, which is always very, very exciting. So we'll say, so now listen to this. A Bogeres, or right, a Bogeres who waited 12 months, or an Almana 30 days. I will say, now let's analyze this for just a little bit. So just the context. Well, so remember again, this is actually the first Mishnah of Maseches Ksubas. I will say, remember again, what's Talacha? There was often up to a year in between Erisin and Nisuin. During that year, what obligations does a husband have in support of his wife? 0. Now the halacha is once that year elapses, if the husband does not marry his wife, then what doesn't do nisuin, then what? Right? Again, the support clause, the support obligation is triggered. Remember again, we had this again. You remember this when we get Suvas, Nistap Chasadeu. What happens if halacha might say they don't get married, but it's not his fault? It's because of her circumstances, is the support obligation triggered? So that's what's happening over here. So Bogeres Shesha Seyud Beis Chodesh. So if you have a Bogeres who waited 12 months, so there was Erusin, and now 12 months have elapsed, and it's time to marry her, or Va'amana Lamed Yom, or for that matter again, an Almana, a widow, after 30 days. So we'll say, again, we'll discuss in just a moment. Rabbi Eliezer, so we'll say, okay, let me say this right now. So halacha maisa, the idea is that normally a girl gets 12 months to prepare for nisuin from the time of erusin. Why is that? Because again, there's an assumption that there's time needed for her to get her accessories, to get her jewelry, to get whatever she needs to get married. An almana is someone who is already married and therefore already had this stuff gathered. So because of that, she doesn't need a year. What does she need? She needs 30 days. Also, we're going to see a bogeres also doesn't need a year. Right? Really, the year is really for a nara. But okay, we'll explain the Gemara in just a moment. So in any event, a bogeres after 12 months, or alright, and almana after 30 days. So we'll say, so these women, so if a man, Ruvain did erusin with Rachel, right? Now 12 months have elapsed. Or if Rachel's an almana, 30 days have elapsed. And we'll say, what happens after 12 months for a bogeres, after 30 days for an almana? What's triggered? Support clause. Right? Support clause is the obligate. Rabbi Elazar Omer, so Rabbi Elazar says, well, now that the husband is obligated to support her, he also has the power to revoke her nedarim. Fascinating. In Rabbi Eliezer's model, if you have to support her, you have the power of neder revocation as well. You will say, take a look at the Ran. Ran is the right-hand side, second line down from the top. Hoel ubay l'chayim zonoseh, kirisnan parak afapi dinosin l'bsula yubeis chodesh. Ula'achar mikan chayim zonoseh, kirisnan higias man v'lo nasu. Ocheles b'shol yafer, b'vado below shutfoseh da'av. We'll say, here's the chiddush. Remember again, we established before, during erusin, how do you revoke, how does the arusa have her nedarim revoked? Who can revoke her nedarim? Father and husband? B'shutfos. But there's this chiddush is, if a year goes by, even though there's still an erusin, once the support clause is triggered, husband has the power of revocation all by himself. Sole power of revocation. The Chum say no. Ein habal meifra ad shetikanes l'shuso. Chum disagree. They say no, not true. Husband only has full or sole power of revocation when? Ultimately, again, during in nisuin. So I will say it's really fascinating. So just understand what's happening over here. Rabbi Eliezer is saying that once the husband has the obligation of support, he gains the power of sole revocation. The Chum say not true. The power of sole revocation only comes when? During nisuin. But any time before nisuin, the husband does not have that koach. So Amar Rabba says, let's analyze. Amar Rabba Elazar u'Mishnah Rishona Amru Davar Echad. So this is very interesting. Rabbi says, Rabbi Eliezer, and the Mishnah Rishona and the original iteration of this halacha say the same thing. I will say, take a look at the Ran for just a moment. Very exciting. The Ran is right across. You don't have to try to find it now. Right? Literally, just move your finger to the right-hand column and it's right there. Rabbi Eliezer, Mishnah Rishona Amru Davar Echad. D'chishegia zmana linasei below niseis. That once the time to get married comes, i.e., after the year, and husband does not marry her, kevan shechayiv baila b'mzonosel chashvina lein l'nesua liktsas dvarim v'afa pish in b'beis baila. So we'll say this is very interesting. Essentially, what Rabbi Eliezer is saying is like this: once the year goes by, right? They did erusin, a year went by. He's not obligated to do nisuin. If he doesn't do it, essentially, the woman becomes a nesua for certain things. In Rabbi Eliezer's model, what does she become a nesua for? Number one, support. He's obligated to support her. Everybody agrees with that. Everybody's obligated to support her. Number two, how does she become a nesua? Hafaras nedarim. He now has sole power to revoke her, to annul her nedarim. Okay, so here we go. This I will say, see, here is the original iteration of this halacha. This nan, nostim lebesula yubeis chodesh lefarnis atzma. We give a basula 12 months in order to get herself ready for her wedding. Okay, he gave yubeis chodesh. Once 12 months elapse, you saw ocheles. So he gave yubeis chodesh ocheles mishalom v'ocheles b'truma. I will say, now what happens after 12 months? If 12 months elapse and he does not marry her, let's assume the reason why they're not getting married is on his side. Right? 12 months elapse and he did not do nisuin, then what's the halacha? She eats his food, i.e. he supports her. What's in is a bigger chiddush. If he's a Kohen, ultimately again, she goes ahead and eats truma as well. And then I will say, we're going to see this in just a moment, but let's analyze this in just a moment. Why doesn't an arusa eat truma? I will say, remember again, mida oraisa. What do you need in order to eat truma? Right? What do you need to eat truma? I guess to be a Kohen, or miknas kaspo, someone acquired by a Kohen. Now I will say, based on that, an arusa should be able to eat truma. Right? Because ultimately, again, he's given her kesef kiddushin. She's quote unquote acquired through money. So ultimately, why does she not eat truma? I'll say two reasons. Remember, we learned this again. Two reasons. Reason number one is ultimately, again, mishum simfon. There's a concern that maybe he's going to find some type of blemish that's going to trigger a mekach taos, avoiding of the whole relationship. And therefore, again, what's going to happen? It's going to turn out retroactively that she was not married to a Kohen and yet consuming truma. So in order to avoid that, what we essentially do is no truma until after nisuin. Second passage says, what are we concerned about? That, remember, where is she living during Erusin? Where is she living? Father's home. We're concerned that if we allow her to eat truma, she's going to take some truma that she's getting from her chassan and what? Bring it home to her family. Those are the two concerns. I just want to put, so this is interesting. So midoraisa, and arusa is permitted to eat truma. Midrabanan, we say she cannot. So now watch this. So therefore during Erusin she can eat truma. After 12 months go by, if he does not do nisuin with her, then halacha l'maisa, he's obligated to support her, and she can eat truma. Aval yavam eno machal b'truma. Rabbi said, listen to this. If it's a yibum case, then halacha l'maisa, she cannot go ahead and eat truma even after 12 months. Even after 12 months. Rabbi said, we're going to see the reason for that is because, remember, yibum, she is not considered to be the yavam's kinyan, right? She is considered to be the deceased brother's kinyan. So because of that, yibum does not, or we're waiting for yibum, even after a year, does not entitle to eat truma. We'll see it in just a moment. So let's listen to this. They both say, if, let's say again, she was 6 months Erusin in front of her chassan, then the chassan died, and ultimately again, she's 6 months in front of the Yavam. Even again, the majority of the year in front, or all of the year with her husband, chasi yom echad, right? I will say now again, the Yavam piece is not really our focus over here, but what the Yavam piece is, here's the halacha, right? The original iteration of the halacha. A man does erusin with a woman, she has 12 months to prepare for the wedding. If after 12 months come and he does not do nisuin, I will say what happens? It triggers a support clause, right? And along with that support clause, interestingly enough, what else does a woman get? If her cousin is a Kohen, truma. And then the Gemara just goes into depth saying none of this applies to a yavam, right? With a yavam, even after a year, let's say he didn't do yibum for a year, she's a shemer, she's waiting for yibum. There's no support clause, and ultimately again, there's no truma. Or at least there's no truma. But we're going to leave aside the yavam. I will say that's the first iteration of the halacha. Beizin shalachreim amrun. I will say a subsequent Beizin came along and said as follows: Ein ha'isha chalas b'truma ad shetikanes l'chuppah. Wow. So I will say, so the second version of this halacha, or the second Beizin came along and reframed this and no. We'll agree that the support clause is triggered up to a year. So in other words, after a year. We'll say they're not arguing on the core halacha, namely that if a man does erusin, he has a year in which to do nisuin, and if after the year he doesn't do nisuin, that triggers the support clause. However, not truma. Truma is not to be consumed by a woman who marries a Kohen until after she enters into the chuppah. And I will say now, why is that? Take a look at the first Y line. Well, it's actually the last two intermediate lines. Beizin shachem amru ein isha chal shum ashtanas chava. We'll say first Y line. Omefarshi asam tamay im yishum simfon kilomar shema yimatze bamum v'nimtza mekcho mekachtos im yishum shema tashke koshel truma lachal lachazos. Exactly what we said before. I will say. Because of the two concerns. So the second Beizin had two concerns. Number one, maybe simfon. Simfon was saying he'll find a mum, right? It's only after they're married, they're going to be intimate together. Maybe he's going to find some type of mum that disqualifies, that makes the whole thing a mekach tos. That's concern number one. Concern number two is we're concerned she's going to take some of the truma back to her family and give them truma. Either way, Rabbi said the second Beizin said no truma until after chuppah. No truma until after nisuin. So I will say, now watch this. Now the idea over here is Now I will say, so remember, what are we trying to figure out over here? The Gemara is trying to say that Rabbi Eliezer himself fits in with the Mishnah Rishona. Right? Rabbi Eliezer said that halacha l'maisa, since ultimately, again, after a year, a husband is chayiv in mizonos, therefore he also attains full or sole revocation abilities. So the Gemara says, and I want to suggest that the Mishnah Rishon of the first Mishnah ultimately is in complete alignment with Rabbi Eliezer. Amalei Abai, I said maybe not. Domalohi, ad kan lo ka'ashma ina Mishnah Rishona ela lemecha b'tshuma d'Rabbanan. So now remember, I want to point out over here, the Gemara wants to point this out as well, which is the Gemara here makes no mention of hataras nedarim or hafaras nedarim, right? In other words, that's not mentioned over here. All the Mishnah Rishona or the Mishnah Shnia are talking about is what? Support. And the Mishnah Rishona, Mishnah Shnia arguing, the Mishnah Rishona, after a year she gets support and she can eat truma. Second version of Halacha, second basin said she can't eat truma. So Abai says, 1 second, there's no mentioning of Nedarim. So Dilma, Lohi, Ad kan lo ka'ashma inan Mishnah Rishona el lamecha b'truma d'Rabbanan. So I'll say, ultimately again, all the Mishnah Rishona's language will say is for what? Truma consumption. Now remember, in the first Mishnah, I will say, the idea that after a year, we allow an arusa to eat truma, I will say, let's be honest, is that a very big deal that after a year we allow her to eat truma? Is that a big deal? No. Why not? Because remember, as we said before, midaraisa, she's allowed to eat truma. Right? It's only midrabanan that she's not allowed to eat truma. So essentially, what do we do after a year? Okay, if husband hasn't married her, after a year, you know what we do? We lift the drabanan, and we allow her to eat truma. It's not such a big deal. I will say, aval midarim daraisa im alone. 1 second. But to give the husband sole revocation power, still during Irisin, who says that the Beis Din allowed that? That's furthermore, the Gemara says, Va'adkan, lo shamasei Rabbi Eliezer elagabi nedarim, kidrat pinchas mishmei derava. So furthermore, I will say, one could also say, we only learn the Salach of Rabbi Eliezer when it comes to nedarim. I will say, because what the Gemara just simply wants to suggest is that the Mishnah Rishona and Rabbi Eliezer don't necessarily align. Because all the Mishnah Rishona is allowing is after a year, a woman is allowed to eat truma. That's not such a big shkoyach, because midaraisa, she could have consumed truma anyway. So all we're allowing after a year is essentially we're lifting an Isser D'Rabbanan. But that doesn't say anything about vesting the husband with sole revocatory power. Furthermore, again, even Rabbi Eliezer in the Mishnah is only talking about Nedarim. He says after a year, husband gets sole revocatory power. In general, we could say that whenever a woman makes a neder, ultimately again, she makes a neder with the das of her husband. Take a look at the Ran for just a moment, Rabbi. It's like smack in the middle of the widest lines. This is very interesting. See, we thought the reason, and the Ran himself said this before, we thought the reason why after a year, Rabbi Eliezer vests the husband with sole revocatory power is because essentially after a year she becomes a little bit like an Isua. Maybe that's not it. Maybe the reason at the end of that after a year he has sole revocatory power is because a woman, when she makes a neder, understands that she wants her husband to consent to that neder, even if it's just during Irisin. Al das baila, I will say, because again, a neder b'pasha is going to impact their relationship. She makes a neder with the consent or understanding of her husband. That's why Rabbi Eliezer says that after a year, husband is vested with sole revocatory power. However, aval truma, afilu midrabana nami la'achal. Maybe Rabbi Eliezer would disagree with the Mishnah Rishona, and would say that even after a year, halacha l'maisa, she can't eat truma. So Rabbi will say, what the Gemara effectively does over here is that halacha l'maisa, there's not necessarily an alignment between the opinions, between the Mishnah Rishon and Rabbi Eliezer. So we'll say, here's what we have. Let's just go back for just a second. What we have, number one, is we passing like this Mishnah Rishon, Mishnah Shnia, which is that halacha l'maisa after a year, if husband does not marry the wife, that triggers the support clause. He's obligated to provide her with mazonos. What is she now allowed to have? Truma. There's no truma until she enters into the chuppah. Furthermore, I'm going to say, how do we consider when it comes to Nedarim? What happens if after a year he doesn't marry her? I will say the Rambam Pasuk is like the Chachamim, namely, the only time husband has sole revocatory power is when? After Nisuin. And therefore, even after a year, even though the support obligation has been triggered, husband is not vested with sole revocatory power, ultimately in Tlach Nisuin. I will say, Bayach. All right, Chevron, have a great day, everyone. A good Shabbos. No, because since she's already in Erisin, for some reason that still continues.
Well, we just said that he's not allowed to name her until they get married 12 months later. Let's say, right?
So you need for it by himself.
So the father still retains power.
Yeah.
When they're in